The Galactic Child Care Consortium didn't just educate the youth of alien species, it refined them, polished them, turned them into the kind of prodigies that made their parents weep with pride at intergalactic conferences. Located on the sprawling space station Lumina 8, the consortium was where the elite sent their offspring to become even more elite, which, if you think about it, was already a pretty high bar. Instructor Kulbesh, a six-limbed insectoid whose chitinous exterior gleamed under the station's artificial lighting, took immense pride in the institution's reputation. Each of Kulbesh's compound eyes could focus independently, which meant the instructor could watch multiple students simultaneously, a feature that came in handy when teaching cubs who could phase through solid matter or spontaneously combust when excited. Then there was Instructor Othmala, a crystalline being whose body refracted light into dancing rainbows across the classroom walls. Othmala communicated through harmonic resonances that translated into any language, which was convenient, though it did make every sentence sound vaguely like a choir warming up. The students themselves represented a dozen species from across 12 systems. There were Drumathi cubs, stocky, four-armed children from a warrior culture that valued strategic thinking above all else. Piklik's younglings, whose oversized craniums housed telepathic abilities that made cheating on tests both impossible and redundant. Hoon children, gaseous beings contained in specially designed environmental suits who could calculate hyperspace coordinates in their sleep. Literally. They'd done it. It had caused a minor navigation incident, but still, impressive. These weren't just smart kids. These were genius kids. The kind who debated philosophy during snack time and corrected their teacher's quantum mechanics equations. The consortium's brochure, a holographic display that updated in real time, boasted a student body with an average IQ equivalent that would make most adult populations weep with inadequacy, which made what was about to happen even more hilarious. Marty pushed his maintenance cart down the corridor outside Classroom 6, the wheels squeaking in a rhythm that suggested one of them was about to give up on life entirely. He'd been on Lumina 8 for about 3 months, hired during what the station administrator had delicately called a staffing emergency, and what Marty understood to be nobody else wanted this job. He was human, which on a station populated primarily by species that had mastered interstellar travel before Earth figured out agriculture, made him something of a novelty. Not a respected novelty, more like a, didn't know they let those wander around unsupervised kind of novelty. The coffee in his thermal mug was terrible, synthesized from a recipe that apparently originated from a species whose taste receptors were fundamentally different from human ones. But it was caffeinated, and that's what mattered. Marty had learned to appreciate the small victories. He was passing Classroom 6 when he heard the first shriek. Not a scared shriek. More like a confused, overwhelmed, "What is happening, and why is physics betraying me?" kind of shriek. Marty paused, took a sip of his terrible coffee, and glanced through the transparent aluminum viewing panel. Inside, chaos had achieved sentience and decided to major in textiles. The lesson, according to the holographic display still flickering on the classroom wall, was titled Independence Skills, Thermal Rest Cloth Management. In simpler terms, the kind of terms Marty's brain preferred, it was blanket folding day. Except none of the cubs were folding blankets. One Drumathi youngling had somehow wrapped all 4 arms and both legs into a single thermal cloth, creating what looked like a very angry, very immobile burrito. The cub was toppling sideways in slow motion, compound eyes wide with betrayal. 2 Piklik's children had gotten their oversized heads tangled together in overlapping blankets, and their telepathic panic was creating visible distortion waves in the air. Marty could actually see their anxiety rippling outward, like heat shimmer. A hoon child's environmental suit had been completely engulfed by a blanket that had somehow tied itself into a knot that appeared to defy three-dimensional geometry. The gaseous being inside was making a sound like a tea kettle trying to harmonize with a didgeridoo. And in the corner, 3 more cubs from species Marty didn't immediately recognize had created what could only be described as a blanket sculpture, an accidental installation art piece titled Textile Singularity. Instructor Kulbesh was clicking frantically, all 6 limbs gesturing in different directions, compound eyes swiveling independently to track each disaster. Remain calm. Apply the theoretical frameworks. Remember your spatial reasoning modules. Instructor Othmala's crystalline form was pulsing through colors at a rate that suggested deep distress, harmonic voice climbing octaves. Initiate systematic analysis. Deconstruct the problem into manageable components. Why are you not deconstructing? Marty watched a Drumathi cub try to think its way out of the blanket burrito using what appeared to be advanced mathematics. The cub's brow, all 3 of them, furrowed in concentration. The blanket didn't care about mathematics. He took another sip of terrible coffee. The door to the classroom slid open with a pneumatic hiss, and Instructor Kulbesh's voice carried into the hallway. This is unprecedented. In 15 cycles of instruction, never has a cohort exhibited such comprehensive cognitive failure. Marty's eyebrows climbed toward his hairline. Cognitive failure. They were calling this a cognitive failure. It was blankets. They couldn't fold blankets. Another instructor, this one, a being that looked like a floating collection of geometric shapes held together by localized gravity fields, rushed past Marty toward the classroom. I received the emergency alert. What is the nature of the crisis? The cubs cannot execute basic thermal rest cloth manipulation. Kulbesh's clicking had reached a pitch that suggested the insectoid was one tangled blanket away from a breakdown. They are experiencing complete practical task paralysis. The geometric being pulsed with obvious concern. Have you implemented the standard intervention protocols? Yes, we provided detailed theoretical instruction. We displayed holographic demonstrations of optimal folding geometry. We even broke down the process into 15 distinct subtasks with accompanying algorithmic flowcharts. Othmala's harmonics were reaching frequencies that made the walls vibrate. Nothing is working. Marty set down his coffee on the maintenance cart. He shouldn't get involved. He was just the maintenance guy. The human maintenance guy. The species that most of the station considered barely more advanced than the cleaning drones. But watching genius alien children slowly suffocate themselves in bedding while their genius alien teachers panicked in geometric patterns was apparently too much for his sense of self-preservation. He walked into the classroom. "Excuse me," Marty said, his voice cutting through the chaos with the kind of authority that comes from not particularly caring about hierarchies. "You folks need some help?" Kulbesh's compound eyes swiveled to focus on him. All of them. It was unsettling. "The human maintenance worker, this is not your designated area. Please exit immediately. We are experiencing an educational crisis." "Yeah, I can see that." Marty surveyed the room, taking in the full scope of the blanket apocalypse. "Want me to, untangle some kids?" Othmala's crystalline form shifted to a deep purple. Confusion, if Marty remembered the color chart correctly. "You believe you can resolve this situation?" "Well," Marty said, walking toward the closest victim, a Drumathi cub who had achieved full burrito status and was now lying on the floor making sounds of existential distress. "It's just blankets. Can't be that hard. The room went quiet. Even the panicking cubs seemed to pause in their struggles. Instructor Kulbesh's mandibles clicked slowly. Just blankets. Right. Marty knelt beside the Drumathi cub, located the edge of the thermal cloth, and began unwrapping. Okay, kiddo, let's get you out of there. Stop flexing your arms. Yeah, I know you're strong, but that's making it tighter. Just relax. There we go. 1 arm, 2 arms, 3, 4, and you're free. The Drumathi cub stood up, all 4 arms spread wide, eyes blinking in astonishment. The youngling looked at Marty like he'd just performed a miracle involving the fundamental restructuring of reality. How did you? Kulbesh started. Basic unwrapping, Marty said, already moving to the next disaster. The 2 Piklik's children with tangled heads. All right, you two, stop using telepathy. I can feel you trying to mind meld your way out of this, and it's giving me a headache. Just hold still. This knot isn't even tight. You just wrapped it in a really weird direction. There. Done. The Piklik's younglings separated, their oversized craniums bobbing in what might have been gratitude or shock. Probably both. Marty worked his way through the classroom like a man defusing bombs, except the bombs were children, and the wires were blankets, and nothing was actually exploding. So really, it was nothing like defusing bombs, but it felt dramatic in the moment. The Hoon child's impossible knot? Turned out, it was just looped through the suit's external framework in a weird way. 20 seconds of work. The textile singularity in the corner? 3 cubs had grabbed the same blanket from different angles and then spun in opposite directions. Marty had them reverse their spinning. Problem solved. Within 5 minutes, every cub was untangled, standing amid piles of unfolded thermal rest cloths, staring at Marty like he'd descended from some higher plane of existence. Which, given that he'd literally just untangled some blankets, was a wild overreaction. Coordinator Polniks chose that moment to arrive, a floating brain in a transparent containment sphere, trailing sensor arrays and looking deeply annoyed. The brain pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that translated to deeply official concern. I received the automated alert. Code Platinum Educational Crisis. What is the... Polniks' optical sensors swept the room, taking in the untangled cubs, the pile of blankets, and Marty standing in the middle of it all holding a thermal cloth. What happened here? The human solved it, Kulbesh said, mandibles clicking in a rhythm that suggested the instructor's entire worldview was currently being restructured. We had 15 cubs experiencing simultaneous practical task failure. The human untangled them in under 6 time units. Polonex's brain literally pulsed brighter. The human, the maintenance worker, human. That's me, Marty confirmed, giving a little wave with his free hand. I just, unwrapped some kids. No big deal. No big deal, Polniks repeated slowly, as if testing how the words felt. These are the most intellectually advanced juveniles in 12-star systems. Our instructors hold degrees from institutes that predate your species' written language. And you untangled them. Yeah, Marty said. Look, I don't want to tell you how to run your school, but maybe the lesson needs some adjusting. These are kids, small ones. Blankets are tricky when you're little. The room's silence was the kind that usually preceded either enlightenment or explosions. Othamala's harmonics dropped to a low, contemplative frequency. Tricky when you're little. Right, Marty said. I mean, human kids struggle with this stuff too. Takes practice. You don't just magically know how to fold things. You have to learn by doing it wrong a bunch of times first. Kulbesh's compound eyes focused on him with an intensity that made Marty regret every decision that had led to this moment. Human young require practice at basic physical tasks? Sure. I mean, babies can't even hold their own heads up. Takes months. Walking? That's like a year of falling over. Don't even get me started on shoelaces. Shoelaces are a nightmare until you're like 6. Coordinator Polniks' sphere rotated slowly, sensors adjusting. The human species dedicates years to teaching offspring basic physical competency. Well, when you put it that way, it sounds bad, Marty said defensively. But yeah, we're pretty useless when we're born. Takes a while to figure things out. The Drumathi cub that Marty had unwrapped first raised one of its 4 arms hesitantly. Can you show us how to fold? Marty looked at the instructors. Kulbesh and Othmala looked at each other. Polniks' brain pulsed in what might have been a shrug if brains could shrug. Sure, Marty said, picking up one of the thermal cloths. Okay. First, you lay it flat on the ground. Smooth it out. Get the wrinkles out. Then you take one corner, fold it to the opposite corner. Make a triangle, see? Or if you want to go rectangle style, you take the edge and fold it to the middle. Then fold again. Then again. Keep going until it's the size you want. That's it. That's the whole thing. 15 young alien geniuses watched him with the kind of rapt attention usually reserved for discovering new laws of physics. One Peaklix youngling raised a hand. But what is the optimal angle for the corner alignment? Marty said. Just put corner on corner? Doesn't have to be perfect. A Hoonchild's environmental suit speakers crackled. What if the material density creates asymmetric folding pressure? Then you smooth it out with your hand, Marty said, demonstrating. Just press it flat. But what about— Look, Marty interrupted, folding the blanket in quick, practiced movements. You're all overthinking this. It's a blanket. It doesn't require advanced math. You just fold it until it's small. Done. See? He held up the neatly folded thermal cloth. The cubs stared at it like it was an artifact from an ancient civilization. Instructor Kulbesh approached slowly, mandibles clicking softly. May I examine your folding technique? Sure, Marty said, handing over the blanket. Kulbesh took it with 2 limbs, turning it over, running sensors across its surface. The corners are aligned to within 98% accuracy. The fold lines are consistent. The final form is structurally sound and space-efficient. This is excellent work. It's a folded blanket, Marty said. Yes, Kulbesh said quietly. It is. Coordinator Polniks drifted closer, optical sensors fixed on Marty. Human Marty, we need to talk. Immediately. And that's when Marty realized that folding a blanket was, apparently, about to change his life in ways he couldn't possibly predict. Which was absurd. But then again, so was everything else on this station. Coordinator Polniks' office was the kind of space that screamed, "I make important decisions," through aggressive minimalism and floating holographic displays. The brain, in the containment sphere, settled into a specialized dock, sensors extending like the limbs of a particularly bureaucratic octopus. Marty sat in a chair designed for a species with a different skeletal structure, which meant he was either too high or too low. He couldn't quite tell which. His coffee had gone cold. Tragedy. Human Marty, Polniks began, bioluminescent patterns pulsing with official gravity. What we witnessed today represents a fundamental challenge to our educational paradigms. I untangled some kids, Marty said. You resolved a code platinum crisis in under 6 time units using methods our instructors, who hold advanced degrees from institutions across the galaxy, could not conceive of. I mean, Marty said, they were overthinking it. The brain pulsed brighter. Overthinking. The application of rigorous analytical frameworks to problem-solving is overthinking. When the problem is a tangled blanket? Yeah. The office door slid open. Instructor Kulbesh skittered in, followed by Othmala, whose crystalline form was cycling through colors that suggested intense academic excitement. Behind them came what appeared to be half the station's educational staff, a collection of beings representing 8 different species, all looking at Marty like he was a particularly interesting laboratory specimen. Coordinator, Kulbesh clicked rapidly. We must document this. The human demonstrated unconscious spatial manipulation abilities that bypass conventional cognitive processing. This could revolutionize our understanding of practical intelligence. I just folded a blanket, Marty repeated, feeling like he'd stumbled into an alternate dimension where basic life skills were arcane secrets. Othmala's harmonics rose excitedly. But how did you know to fold it? What computational frameworks did you employ? What algorithms guided your decision-making process? I learned when I was a kid, Marty said, phrasing it as a question because the entire conversation felt unreal. My mom showed me. Then I practiced. You do it wrong a bunch of times, figure out what works, and eventually it becomes automatic. The assembled educators exchanged glances, or the equivalent, given that some of them didn't have traditional eyes. A floating geometric being that Marty vaguely recognized from the hallways spoke up, voice resonating from somewhere within its crystalline structure. Your parental unit provided direct instruction in thermal rest cloth manipulation? In folding blankets? Yeah, that's pretty normal for humans. And this instruction occurred during your developmental phase? I was like 5, maybe 6. Little kids help with laundry. It's a thing. Polniks's entire sphere rotated to face the other educators. Access the human cultural database. Search for childhood developmental activities. A holographic display materialized in the center of the office, cascading with information. Images of human children engaged in various activities. Folding clothes, tying shoes, stacking blocks, pouring liquids, buttoning shirts, zipping jackets. The alien educators watched in stunned silence. They teach their offspring hundreds of microphysical tasks, Kulbesh whispered, compound eyes fixed on the display, before the children even enter formal education. Look at this, another instructor said, manipulating the hologram. Human young practice hand-eye coordination through play. They manipulate objects without specific purpose beyond skill development. They learn through failure repetition. Othmala's harmonics trembled. The cultural database indicates human children attempt tasks, fail, and try again. Multiple times, without formal algorithmic instruction. Marty watched the aliens have a collective existential crisis over the revelation that human kids played with blocks. This explains everything, Polnik said quietly. We've been training our cubs in advanced theoretical frameworks since they could process information. Abstract mathematics, quantum mechanics, hyperspace navigation theory, all before they've developed basic physical competency. Our children can calculate the trajectory of a comet through a gravitational field, Kulbesh said, mandibles clicking slowly. But they cannot manipulate a simple textile. We optimized for cognitive advancement, another instructor added, and eliminated practical skill development as inefficient. Meanwhile, Polniks continued, sensors focusing on Marty, humans spend years teaching their young to manage physical reality before introducing complex abstractions. I mean, we also teach them math and reading and stuff, Marty interjected. We don't just fold blankets until we're 18. But the foundation is practical, Kulbesh said. Physical mastery before theoretical application. Sure, I guess. The office fell silent except for the ambient hum of the station's life support systems. Finally, Coordinator Polniks spoke. Bioluminescent patterns shifting to what Marty had learned meant official declaration mode. Human Marty, I am temporarily reassigning you from maintenance duties. Effective immediately, you are appointed as consultant for basic physical competency. Your responsibility will be to teach our cubs, and possibly our instructors, the practical skills that human children learn during developmental phases. Marty blinked. You want me to teach alien genius kids how to fold laundry and manipulate fasteners, manage liquid containers, construct simple objects, and whatever other fundamental skills humans consider basic. That's insane. That, Polnik said, is your new job. Description. Your compensation will be adjusted accordingly. Marty thought about his terrible coffee, his squeaky maintenance cart, and the fact that he'd be teaching skills he'd learned before he could remember learning them. Do I get better coffee? Yes. Deal. The news spread through Lumina 8 like a virus, except instead of making people sick, it made them profoundly uncomfortable about their entire educational philosophy. Human solves educational crisis using methods classified as primitive. Maintenance worker demonstrates skills, unknown to advanced species. Local human knows how rectangles work. Scientists baffled. Marty's first official day as consultant for basic physical competency began with him standing in front of classroom 6, holding a box of supplies he'd requisitioned from storage. The cubs sat in their designated learning spaces, compound eyes and optical sensors, and whatever other sensory organs they possessed, all fixed on him with unsettling intensity. Instructor Kulbesh stood in the corner, data tablet in multiple limbs, ready to document everything. Okay, Marty said, setting the box down. Today we're going to learn something that human kids usually figure out around age 4 or 5. We're going to tie knots. He pulled out a length of synthetic rope. A Dramathi cub's hand shot up. Well, one of 4 hands. Will we be calculating the tensile strength requirements for different knot configurations? No, Marty said. We're just going to tie them. But without understanding the physics of friction and load distribution, we're just going to tie them. The cub looked personally offended by this pedagogical approach. Marty demonstrated a basic overhand knot, the kind of thing he could do in his sleep, the kind of thing he had done in his sleep once during a particularly weird dream about rock climbing. You take the rope, make a loop, put the end through the loop, pull tight. That's it. 15 young aliens stared at the knot, like it contained the secrets of the universe. Now you try, Marty said, distributing rope lengths to each cub. What followed was a masterclass in overthinking. The Dramathi cub tried to calculate the optimal loop diameter using what appeared to be calculus. The Picklix younglings attempted to use telepathy to manipulate the rope, which resulted in the rope vibrating anxiously but not actually forming a knot. A Hoon child tried to adjust the atmospheric pressure inside their environmental suit to create air currents that would theoretically position the rope correctly. None of them just tied the knot. Stop, Marty said, holding up his hands. Stop thinking. Just do it. Loop, through, pull. But how do you know where to place the loop? A Picklix cub asked, oversized cranium tilted in confusion. You just put it somewhere. It doesn't matter exactly where. Just make a loop that looks like a loop. Define looks like a loop, in measurable parameters. Marty felt something in his brain start to cramp. It's round-ish, round-ish, like a circle had a bad day but is doing its best. The cubs exchanged glances, those that had eyes capable of glancing. Instructor Kulbesh's mandibles clicked softly. Perhaps demonstrate again, with verbal annotation of each micro-movement? Marty tied another knot, this time narrating in excruciating detail. Okay, I'm holding the rope with my right hand about 20 centimeters from the end. I'm making a loop by crossing the end over the main part. Yeah, just crossing it. No specific angle required. Now I'm taking the end and poking it through the loop from underneath. Now I'm pulling both ends away from each other until the knot tightens. Done. Knot. He held it up, slowly, haltingly, with the kind of intense concentration usually reserved for diffusing antimatter bombs. The cubs began tying knots. Most of them were terrible. Some were barely functional. One Drumathi cub somehow tied their own limbs together, all four of them, which was actually impressive from a certain perspective. But they were learning. Good, Marty said, untangling the Drumathi cub for the second time that morning. Now, let's try a different knot. This one's called a square knot, and humans use it to tie two ropes together, or to tie bandages, or to secure packages, or… What is the failure rate of square knots under variable load conditions? A Hoonchild interrupted. I have no idea, Marty admitted. I just know it works pretty well for most normal stuff. You want to secure a spaceship with it? Maybe ask an engineer. The concept of using something without fully understanding its theoretical limitations seemed to cause minor existential distress among several cubs. By the end of the 2-hour session, most of the students could tie a basic overhand knot without accidentally restraining themselves. Marty considered this a victory. Kulbesh approached as the cubs filed out, data tablet covered in notes. Fascinating. You employ what I can only describe as approximation pedagogy. You accept imperfect results as progress. I mean, yeah, Marty said, coiling up the practice ropes. Perfection comes later. First, you just need to get the basic idea. Revolutionary, Kulbesh murmured, mandibles clicking rapidly. The next few days established a pattern that would have been hilarious if it weren't so genuinely bizarre. Marty taught the cubs how to button buttons, a task that required fine motor control and spatial reasoning, but absolutely zero advanced mathematics. Half the class tried to calculate the optimal insertion angle for button-through buttonhole mechanics. Marty had to physically stop a Peculix youngling from attempting to derive a universal buttonhole theorem. It's a button, Marty said, demonstrating for the 8th time. You just push it through the hole. That's the entire concept. Humans figured this out hundreds of years ago, and we were barely past hitting rocks with sticks. But the button, diameter versus buttonhole. Diameter must maintain specific ratios. Sure, yeah, that's how buttons are made. You're not making buttons, you're just using them. Push button through hole. Pull button out other side. Done. The moment when a Drumathi cub successfully buttoned a shirt for the first time, all 4 arms working in coordination, was treated like a groundbreaking achievement. Kulbesh recorded it from multiple angles. Othmala's crystalline form cycled through every color in visible spectrum, and a few that probably weren't. Then came the day Marty introduced the concept of the paper airplane. He'd requisitioned actual paper, not data tablets, not holographic displays, but actual physical paper, from the station's archival department. The archivist, a being composed of organized gas clouds, had looked at him like he'd requested weapons-grade plutonium. It's just paper, Marty had said. Physical information storage medium is classified as Historical artifact, the archivist had replied, voice emanating from somewhere within the gas clouds. Can I have some? I suppose. Now Marty stood in front of classroom 6, holding a stack of paper, and the cubs looked at it with obvious confusion. This, Marty announced, is paper. Humans use it for writing, drawing, wrapping things, and, most importantly, making aircraft. That material cannot achieve flight, a Hoon child stated flatly. It lacks propulsion systems, control surfaces are inadequate, and the structural integrity. Watch, Marty said. He folded a paper airplane in about 15 seconds. Valley fold, fold the wings down, done, and threw it across the classroom. It sailed in a graceful arc, glided for about 3 meters, and landed on instructor Othmala's desk. The silence that followed was profound. How? A Peaklix cub whispered. Did that function? Folded it into a wing shape, Marty said, retrieving the plane. Air moves over and under it, creates lift, basic aerodynamics. Human kids make these for fun. For fun? Yeah. You have races. See whose flies farthest. Try different fold patterns. It's a whole thing. Kulbesh approached the paper airplane like it might explode. This represents functional aeronautic engineering using primitive materials and no computational assistance. It's a folded piece of paper, Marty said. Yes, Kulbesh said quietly. It is? Marty distributed paper to the cubs. Okay, everyone gets one sheet. I'm going to show you how to fold it, step by step. Follow along. What happened next would later be referred to in Lumina 8's educational records as the incident that broke the physics department. The cubs tried to make paper airplanes. They really did. But their approaches varied wildly. Several Drumathi cubs attempted to engineer optimal aerodynamic profiles using calculations that would have impressed actual aerospace engineers. Their planes looked like they'd been designed by committee, technically, sophisticated, aesthetically nightmarish, and completely incapable of flight. The Peaklix younglings tried to fold the paper telepathically. This resulted in paper that was very anxious, but not remotely airplane-shaped. One Hoon child tried to reduce atmospheric pressure in front of their paper to create a vacuum that would theoretically pull the plane forward. The paper imploded. Marty watched this unfold, literally, with a growing sense that he'd made a terrible mistake. Stop, he said. Everyone stop. Put the paper down. 15 disasters in progress paused. You're all thinking too hard, Marty said. This isn't about perfect aerodynamics or physics optimization. It's about making a thing that sort of looks like a plane and seeing if it flies. If it doesn't fly well, you adjust it. That's the entire process. Experiment, fail, adjust, try again. But without theoretical framework, a cub began. No framework, Marty interrupted. Just fold the paper like I showed you and throw it. If it crashes immediately, we'll figure out why. But you can't figure out what's wrong until you try it first. This concept, doing something without guaranteed success, learning from failure, iterating based on results rather than theory, appeared to be genuinely alien to them. Slowly, hesitantly, the cubs began folding paper. Most of the first attempts couldn't fly. Some could barely be called airplanes. But Marty walked around the classroom, making small adjustments, offering suggestions, and gradually, incredibly, paper airplanes began to fly. When the first Drumathi cub successfully flew a plane across the room, the younglings stared at their 4 hands like they'd grown extra limbs. I did not calculate the wing loading, the cub said, voice filled with wonder and confusion. Nope, Marty agreed. I did not optimize the center of gravity. Nope. I just folded it. And it worked. Yeah, Marty said. Sometimes things just work. That's when the door opened, and three beings in official science department uniforms entered the classroom. The lead scientist, a species Marty didn't recognize, with too many joints in all the wrong places, pointed at the paper airplanes with something that might have been a hand. Explain, the scientist demanded, how unpowered cellulose structures are achieving sustained flight without computational guidance systems. Marty picked up a paper airplane and threw it at them. It bounced off the scientist's chest and fell to the floor. It's paper, Marty said, folded into a wing shape. Aerodynamics does the rest. Human children have been doing this for over a century. The scientists stared at the fallen airplane like it had personally insulted their degrees. This, the lead scientist said slowly, is going to require a committee. Of course it was. By the end of the week, Marty's impromptu paper airplane demonstration had sparked a station-wide debate about the nature of intelligence, the value of practical versus theoretical knowledge, and whether the entire galactic educational system had been fundamentally misguided for the past 1,000 years, which seemed like an overreaction to some folded paper. But Marty was learning that overreacting was the station's default setting. Coordinator Paul Neeks summoned him again. "We need to talk about your teaching methods," the brain said. "Did I break something?" Marty asked. "Yes," Paul Neeks said. "Everything." Coordinator Paul Nex's office had acquired additional occupants since Marty's last visit. The space now contained representatives from 8 different educational institutions across 4 star systems, all connected via holographic projection. Some were physically present: crystalline beings, floating geometric shapes, one creature that appeared to be made entirely of organized light. Others flickered as 3-dimensional images, faces and forms rendered in blue-tinged transparency. Marty sat in the same uncomfortable chair, holding a cup of coffee that was actually good this time. Apparently, consultant for basic physical competency came with access to the premium synthesizer settings. Small victories. The Galactic Child Care Consortium announced a holographic figure representing the Tolvex Institute of Advanced Learning has become a laughingstock. "That seems harsh," Marty said. "Our students, the brightest minds in 12 systems, required instruction from a human in tasks that should be instinctual." "Nothing about folding is instinctual," Marty pointed out. "Babies can't fold. Human or otherwise, I'm guessing. It's a learned skill." "That," Instructor Kulbesh interjected, mandibles clicking thoughtfully, "is precisely the issue we must address. We have been operating under a fundamental misconception about the nature of intelligence." A being composed of swirling gas clouds spoke next, voice resonating from within its form. "Our curricula focus exclusively on abstract reasoning, theoretical frameworks, and computational analysis. We believed physical tasks were beneath academic consideration, primitive activities that advanced species had evolved beyond." "Turns out," Marty said, taking a sip of excellent coffee, "you can't actually evolve beyond needing to interact with physical objects, unless you're gonna float around thinking about math all day and never touch anything." "Some species do precisely that," the gas cloud replied defensively. "And how's that working out for their kids?" Silence. Othmala's crystalline form pulsed with subdued colors. "Our educational models prioritize cognitive development while assuming physical competency will emerge spontaneously. We teach cubs to navigate hyperspace before teaching them to navigate a doorway without collision. We train them to solve quantum equations," added another instructor, "but not to pour liquid from one container to another without spillage." "Yesterday," Kulbesh said quietly, "a Drumathi cub asked me how to open a manual. Door. A door, human Marty. The cub can calculate the energy requirements for terraforming a planet, but cannot operate a simple mechanical hinge. Marty set down his coffee. Okay, so what are you asking me here? You want me to completely restructure your education system? Because I'm a maintenance guy who knows how to fold laundry. I'm not qualified to redesign intergalactic pedagogy. Coordinator Polniks's brain pulsed with bioluminescent intensity. We are not asking you to redesign anything. We are asking you to continue doing what you have been doing, teaching practical skills, while we observe, document, and integrate these methods into our existing frameworks. You want to study me like a lab experiment? We prefer to call it collaborative pedagogical research, Polnik said. That's absolutely studying me like a lab experiment. Yes, at least they were honest about it. A holographic representative from a species Marty didn't recognize leaned forward, multifaceted eyes gleaming. Human Marty, are you aware that across the known galaxy, advanced civilizations have systematically eliminated practical skill training from early education? I am now, Marty said. We optimized for intelligence. We selected for cognitive abilities. We engineered our species, genetically, educationally, culturally, to excel at abstract thought. And in doing so, we lost something your species retained. The ability to tie our shoes? The integration of mind and body, Kulbesh said. Humans learn through physical interaction with their environment. Your neural development is intrinsically linked to manual manipulation, spatial reasoning through movement, problem-solving through tactile feedback. We evolved beyond such primitive necessities, the holographic figure said, and in the process, we created a generation that can deconstruct the fabric of space-time, but cannot construct a simple textile fold. Marty looked around the room at the assembled galactic intelligentsia, all of them staring at him with something between admiration and existential horror. So what you're telling me, he said slowly, is that by getting really smart, you all accidentally made yourselves kind of useless at basic tasks. That, Polnik said, is an uncomfortably accurate summary. And humans never had that problem because we're, what, not smart enough to optimize ourselves into incompetence? Your species achieved technological advancement while maintaining practical competency, Othmala said. You built starships while still teaching your young to tie knots. You developed quantum computing while preserving traditions of manual craftsmanship. You never abandoned the physical for the theoretical. We're generalists, Marty said, realization dawning. Humans are okay at a lot of things, but we're not hyper-specialized in any one area. Precisely, Kulbesh clicked. While we were perfecting singular aspects of intelligence, you maintained balance. The room fell quiet except for the ambient hum of holographic projectors and life support systems. Finally, the representative from Tolvex Institute spoke. We need to integrate human practical methodologies into our early education programs, not to replace theoretical instruction, but to complement it, to restore the balance we lost. Starting when? Marty asked. Immediately, Polnik said. We have already received requests from educational institutions across 8 systems. They want human consultants. They want practical skills curricula. They want their cubs to learn to fold blankets before they learn to fold space-time. Marty laughed, a genuine surprised bark of laughter that made several aliens flinch. You're serious. You actually want humans to teach aliens how to do normal life stuff. We are entirely serious, Poloniks confirmed. This is insane. This is necessary. Over the following weeks, Marty's role expanded in ways that would have seemed impossible back when his biggest concern was fixing malfunctioning air recyclers. He taught cubs how to stack blocks, a task that required understanding balance, gravity, and spatial relationships without any computational assistance. The first successful tower, built by a Peaklix youngling, was documented from 16 angles and analyzed by 3 separate research teams. He demonstrated how to pour water from a pitcher into a cup without spilling. This apparently violated several species' assumptions about fluid dynamics requiring active guidance systems. He showed them how to draw with actual physical writing implements on actual physical surfaces. The concept of creating permanent marks through applied pressure was simultaneously obvious and revolutionary. He taught them to build simple structures with interlocking blocks, to organize objects by size without measuring instruments, to estimate distances by eye rather than laser rangefinder. Every task was something human children learned before formal schooling. Every task was something these genius alien cubs struggled with initially and then slowly, haltingly, mastered. And something remarkable happened. The cubs who learned to manipulate physical objects, who practiced tying knots and folding paper and stacking blocks, began performing better in their theoretical studies. Their spatial reasoning improved. Their problem-solving became more intuitive. They developed confidence in their ability to interact with the physical world. A Dramathi parent arrived at the consortium one afternoon, all 4 arms gesturing with obvious emotion. "My offspring dressed itself this morning, without assistance, for the first time in its life." The parent's voice carried a mix of pride and embarrassment that transcended species differences. Marty, who happened to be in the corridor carrying supplies for the afternoon's Introduction to Basic Carpentry session, paused. "That's good," he said. "It is 14 cycles old," the parent said. "At home, we have automated systems for clothing assistance. We never considered teaching manual dressing as necessary." "Right," Marty said. "Well, congrats to your kid." "Thank you, human Marty." The parent's tone carried genuine gratitude. "Thank you for teaching my offspring to be competent." After the parent left, Marty stood in the corridor holding a box of wooden planks and child-safe hammers, contemplating the bizarre turn his life had taken. He'd come to Lumina 8 as emergency backup maintenance staff. Now he was apparently revolutionizing galactic education by teaching kids to tie their shoes. The universe, Marty decided, had a seriously weird sense of humor. Coordinator Paul Nix found him in classroom 6 later that afternoon, watching cubs attempt to hammer nails into wood with varying degrees of success and absolutely zero computational assistance. "Your contract has been extended indefinitely," Paul Nix announced. "Multiple institutions are requesting human practical skills consultants. We are establishing a new department, Physical Competency Integration, and you have been designated as department lead." "I'm gonna need a bigger coffee allowance," Marty said. "Done. And maybe a chair that actually fits humans." "Also done. And you have to stop calling basic life skills revolutionary human methodology. It's embarrassing." "That," Polnick said, brain pulsing with what might have been amusement, "is non-negotiable. You are the human who taught the galaxy's brightest minds to fold blankets. You will be remembered as revolutionary whether you like it or not." Marty watched a Hoon child successfully hammer a nail straight for the first time, the youngling's environmental suit practically vibrating with excitement. "Yeah," he said, "I guess I can live with that." 3 months later, Marty sat in his new office, equipped with human-appropriate furniture and a coffee synthesizer with premium settings, reviewing requests from educational institutions across known space. Everyone wanted practical skills training. Everyone wanted their cubs to learn the basic competencies that humans took for granted. His assistant, a helpful crystalline being named Luxandra, floated through the door carrying a data tablet. "Human Marty," Luxandra said, harmonic voice cheerful. "We have received another request. The Quillenth Academy wants you to teach their advanced students how to tie shoelaces." Marty looked up from his desk. "Do the Quillenth even have feet?" "No." "Do they wear shoes?" "Also, no." "Then why?" "They believe the skill has transferable applications to tentacle management," Luxandra explained. They were very insistent. Marty leaned back in his chair and laughed, a long, genuine laugh that probably looked unhinged to anyone watching. Because somewhere in the vast complexity of the universe, advanced alien civilizations had collectively realized that maybe, just maybe, knowing how to fold a blanket was as important as knowing how fold space-time. And the human who'd taught them that lesson? He'd gotten the job because nobody else wanted it. Marty raised his coffee cup in a solitary toast to the absurdity of existence. "Send them a proposal," he told Luxandra. "Let's teach some tentacle beings about shoelaces." "Excellent," Luxandra chimed. "Shall I classify this as advanced physical competency or revolutionary human methodology?" "Just call it what it is," Marty said, grinning. "Basic stuff that somebody should have taught them years ago." Outside his office window, Lumina 8 rotated slowly through space, a monument to galactic achievement and cooperation. Inside that monument, in classrooms across multiple decks, alien cubs were learning to stack blocks, tie knots, and fold blankets. The galaxy's greatest minds had discovered something profound. Sometimes the most important knowledge wasn't how to calculate the trajectory of a comet or navigate hyperspace. Sometimes it was just knowing how to fold a blanket without rolling yourself inside it instead. And if that wasn't the most human lesson to teach the galaxy, Marty didn't know what was.